Jeff Sanders, thank you so much for joining me today. This is an amazing opportunity to talk about, well, let's talk about the truth. Let's talk about how we figure out what is the truth and who are the arbiters of said truth. You've been covering this story for a while. Tell me about fact checkers. We see it, going down with Facebook has announced that they're no longer going to be using fact checkers. They're going to switch to a X type community guidelines, or not community notes sort of system. We get to see what it's going to look like. But tell me a bit about the fact checkers and your rendition, your take on this.
Right. So I looked into fact checkers and some other sort of, I guess, areas that are kind of border fact checking. It was about 4 or 5 years ago, just to try and determine, maybe it's longer than that, to determine, if the innuendo about their bias or not was, fair. You should pull up that headline that the New York Times had to kind of illustrate, I think, the whole thing around the fact checkers there, where Meta, and by the way, Meta is canceling fact checkers only for America. I don't know if that is going to apply to Canada and Mexico, but overseas, they still are going to employ their fact checking service, I guess, that the site.
Oh, I see. So it's not everywhere. Let me pop this up, because this is the article that it just made me laugh when I saw this headline, because this is the idiocy of this. Meta says fact checkers were the problem. Fact checkers rule that as false. You can't make that up. This is a real article, by the way, for people who don't know. I had to look at it through a portal because it's behind a paywall. But the New York Times publishing this, fact-checking groups that worked with Meta said they had no role in deciding what the company did with the content that was fact-checked. Of course. And this is kind of par for the course, because people have been fact-checked on a number of things. Memes are getting fact-checked. Satire is getting fact-checked. Just opinions. So somebody will put out an opinion about a thing, and then that will get taken down because it's ruled false or misleading or what have you. How is this to be the case? And who decides who these arbiters are? It's all seems really behind closed doors, right?
I don't know if it's behind closed doors. It's fairly open when you take a look to see who is employed to fulfill that role. The bigger issue that sort of streamlines off of that is when our government wants to do their own bureau of fact checking. I know that we just had, I guess everything is at the moment paused in Parliament, but we had the Online Harms Act, and you always start with a nugget of something that's important, and then you put a whole bunch of filling and toppers on there that make it according to, I guess, what your political goals really are. So there is the Biden administration, they did create a disinformation board with I should have looked this up beforehand, but the person they had hired to do that had a terribly checkered history, and there was a lot of pressure to kind of cancel that. I know I was suspicious when
that was successful, though, right? They were successful in canceling that. They went all over the news. I remember the Ministry of Truth that they were opening up, like out of a George Orwell novel, 1984. It's unbelievable that the government would come in and say that they're the arbiters of this truthiness.
Right.
I guess you call it.
Right. And that was the question that nobody from the BC NDP, where I live here in British Columbia, like you, they always ghost me because I represent Epoch Times. The federal Liberals usually wouldn't give me responses either. And this is part of the landscape out there for journalism, is that depending on your media outlet depends on whether or not you get a reply or not. And so I remember covering, I think it was an announcement by Adrian Dix and Bonnie Henry here in British Columbia that they were going to, it had something to do, I think, with teachers, and they weren't going to force them to get COVID shots or something like that.
Hmm.
But at the end of her, the press conference, the provincial health officer, Bonnie Henry, was talking about, hey, you need to go and do your own fact checking. You have to trust reliable sources for your news, like our government website and the Canadian Ministry of Health and stuff like that, trying to lead us into that. And that could be a fair thing for somebody to say, but my question to all of this as they were moving in this direction is, who's going to tell us the truth if you're the ones that are overseeing it and you're the ones that are lying? And this is where, when I studied it 35 years ago, our primary function was to hold government accountable. And now we're putting on team jerseys and we're not doing that anymore. So to have the government decide what's going to be a fact or not, that makes a lot of sense with how journalism is allowing them to do that. So we've kind of dovetailed off that a little bit. But when I was looking into fact checkers, you talked about I remember Snopes. One of the things that happened with them is the Babylon Bee kept getting fact checked. And if you and your viewers don't know who they are, it is a satire
Satire.
website.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they put ridiculous headlines on there, but they're hilarious. Most of them are extremely funny. But what they
Very
would
funny.
what Snopes would do is they would go and say this is false. So like I kind of brought my thing up, but they would have like AOC doesn't advance on the Price is Right because she guesses every bid to be zero. Obviously, she wasn't on the Price is Right, and if she was, she wouldn't be so silly to do that herself. But what the Babylon Bee ended up doing was suing them because they were losing all of their income stream that would come from their social media posting. So whatever they would get for their platform on, I guess, Facebook or Twitter, wherever they were posting, they were getting demonetized because they were deemed to have all this misinformation that would start with with Snopes.
But that's the
So
nature of a joke. A joke is misinformation. It's misguided. It's misdirecting you into a funny situation that will make you laugh. I mean, nobody looks at like this headline, for example. Here's one from the Babylon Bee that I think is hilarious. Gavin Newsom rushes into burning building to inform fire victim that Trump is bad. Like
yeah,
nobody believes that's real. It's funny, and that's that.
yeah. Well, if you were to go on their website, you'll see a lot of the headlines that they will go back to and say these were the ones that we got that turned out to be true. Eventually, they have it's like the Simpsons, and they're predicting the future kind of a thing. So, but the whole point was to try and take them down so that they would become, I don't want to quite say that they wouldn't have any relevancy in the world, but they certainly wanted to impact their ability to make money and have influence. Because once you get these strikes, I guess I don't use social media really, but your the algorithm that would promote you to other potential viewers and listeners becomes decreased or eliminated. And so, yeah, they wanted to, and this was largely a government initiative. I mean, there was the Global Engagement Center, I think it was called. I did a little bit of research on that today. So what they did, let me find it here, is this was created by the Department of Homeland Security or something in the United States, the Global Engagement Center. And so this is what its mandate was. Its mission was to lead U.S. government efforts to recognize, understand, expose, and counter foreign state and non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts aimed at undermining or influencing the policy, security, and stability of the United States. Of course, it closed on December 23rd last month. Now that Congress won't renew any contracts with it, and with Donald Trump coming in, they had to kind of change. Now, the reason that they were not getting congressional money anymore is they stopped looking at what was happening overseas and taking a look at what Russia, China, Serbia, whomever might be doing to undermine America, and they turned it inward and they started using those tools in America. So now you're getting people like, say, a Joe Rogan, or you get the American uh, whatever, take a, say, Fox News, or they were only targeting the conservative sort of voices or people who might try to amplify that. And so there's a lot of things that ended up happening. They gave $100,000 to something called the Global Disinformation Index, and so I was looking that up, and they created a purveyors of disinformation team in America. So if you were to get anything like a newsletter or any of the media that they would put out there, it's like, hey, you don't want to go to the New York Post or the Epoch Times or whatever, because these guys are purveyors of disinformation. They did one in Canada as well. In 2021, they published a Canadian disinformation index on a group of media outlets, and they listed CBC, CTV, and the Toronto Star among them as the most honest outlets that are in Canada. Now,
You gotta
with
be
your
kidding
laughter
me.
there, I was a little bit horrified because my own experience anecdotally tells me that that's not the case. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so it's just another illustration. So this this security agency was set up to help protect the United States from propaganda and misinformation elsewhere coming in and influencing its people. So take the allegation that TikTok is trying to, dumb down the, American youth. That would be something that they would look into. But what they started doing was focusing on their in-house communicators and targeting them. And so this is where the fact checking, goes outside the borders. It's because they don't want you to say something that goes against their interests, even if it's true. So this is one of the other problems. The one fact checker that I did do a dive into was PolitiFact. I think it was started in around 2007 or something like that by a media outlet called the Poynter Institute. And what they would do is they would take somebody who's a public figure, largely an American politician, but they also, had others that they would do, and they would take a look and see whether the statement was true or false. So a classic one might be when Barack Obama said, if with the Obamacare that was coming in or that they were promoting, you can keep your doctor if you want, you can keep your healthcare plan, that type of a thing. So
And
they would
that was
investigate.
untrue. That was found to be untrue.
Well, when people were saying, hey, like, could it be like, that's a big statement to make. And so that would be the type of one that they would look at. And then there would be others that would have some controversy that people like yourself or me might say, and they would investigate to find out that we're the ones that are making the false allegations, or there is some context that's missing. So like everything, maybe it started out with the right, sort of initiative or the right moral, ethical sort of background because they wanted to try and get facts out there. But really what it quickly turned into was a targeting of Republicans. And like among the things that I had found were that, you would take, say, Elizabeth Warren and Ted Cruz. These were two senators that ended up being elected the same year. And they had fact checked Ted Cruz something like 130 times and Elizabeth Warren 4 times. And just to show the disparity, right? You would have a longtime politician, high profile one like Chuck Schumer, they had fact checked, 10 times, but somebody who'd only been in Congress for 2 years like Josh Hawley was getting fact checked like, 20 times. And so they were always looking to find the Republicans to sort of make a case on. And I found a really good comparison. So they were taking 2 attorney generals. So when Barack Obama was president, his initial attorney general was Eric Holder. And when Donald Trump was first elected, his initial attorney general was Jeff Sessions. So they both made a statement that had sort of the same sort of background. So Holder was talking about minorities not having access to identification. So the idea being is that they can't make voter ID mandatory because that's taking away the vote of minorities. He didn't reference anything. They couldn't pin it to anything. So what they did is they went back to some previous studies some years earlier that suggested that there were some minority groups that did not have a driver's license, or maybe I can't remember how they termed it, but some type of identifiable identities, go and vote or get on an airplane or whatever. And it was a small amount, but they said that it did exist. So under that sort of understanding, they labeled what he said to be true.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
Well, maybe,
It sounds
whatever.
like
They reference
finding
some type of statistic anyways, right? So
yeah, but that's lying with statistics at that point. I mean, like in a broad view, people all people have access to get IDs, and most people to say that minorities can't get a hold of IDs, it sounds a bit racist. I mean, on the surface level,
yeah. Well,
it
like
sounds like
I
they're just
wrote it down
digging to
here.
find something just to say that they were correct in that case.
Yeah, well, and for Jeff Sessions, so what he said was our courts find that 80% of those who file for asylum, so he's talking about immigrants that are looking to become refugees. He said our courts find that 80% of those who file for asylum aren't qualified for it, and therefore they do not merit relief. So the reason they said that was false is because of that 80%, that included a large portion of people who wouldn't go to court or abandon their claims, or had poor representation. So the way PolitiFact was identifying it as false is that, well, his numbers can't be right, because if they had better representation, or if they were able to stay in the country and fight their claim, those numbers would improve. Therefore, what he said wasn't real. So
that's an opinion, though. That's not fact.
Well, they're not basing it on facts. They're just trying to use it on probability. But this is the same type of thing that they had done with Eric Holder in saying, well, we don't have actual numbers, but we can presume that when this last study was done in whenever it was, 1990 or something like this, that it's going to stay the same, that minorities aren't getting identification. Anyways, it's just a dishonest way for them to take their scale of determining what's true or false, because they would have true, partly true, kind of I forget all their terminology, but they kind of a sliding scale, so that you're missing a key point, so therefore it needs context or whatever. So they were pretty guilty, and by using so many of their fact checks on conservative figures, it showed that they were really, to me anyways, it showed that they were really targeting them, so that it would give, I think, people like in the media a reference point to say, well, Ted Cruz is going against Elizabeth Warren, and he's been found to have lied like 80% more than Elizabeth Warren, kind of a thing, right? So that's just a statistic that they were creating, I think, to help the media be punishing against their political adversaries, right?
And some of these organizations, they would just maybe gloss over and not touch a particular subject. Snopes famously not doing what was it, the very fine people hoax. And finally they came out and they finally did an article on it. I mean, how many years later? This was dated. What's the date on this? June 21st, 2024. They didn't fact check this thing from 2017. And they did it I think this was to save face. No, Trump did not call neo-Nazis and white supremacists very fine people, even though that's been spread forever. That is genuine misinformation. That is misinforming people intentionally when they're saying this particular thing.
I'll tell you, Clyde, that press conference that Trump gave that day, it was on infrastructure spending, and I was driving in my truck listening to it live. I heard the whole thing. The next day, when I tuned into National Post Radio, so I was trying to get my Canadian content early in the morning, and there was a left-wing host with her left-wing producer, and they were popping champagne and high-fiving, and we finally got proof that Trump is a racist. and they referenced that meeting, or that press conference. And I was like, wait a second, I listened to the whole thing. Like, I didn't hear anything. And so I went back and read the transcript, and yeah, so it just was another shark that the media was willing to jump, because from a partisan point of view, that's what matters more than anything, not the truth anymore. It's very sad. By the way, you mentioned Snopes in that when they finally got around to it. I don't think they ever
Yeah.
got around to the Covington Catholic kids
No, they
story.
haven't.
Haven't checked because I haven't gone on Snopes for years. But when I did this, or when I was researching this again, the fella that was his name was Nathan Phillips. He was the activist that went up to the kid with the MAGA hat and then claimed that they were blocking him from being able to get around, and they were shouting racist things at him. And he went on.
Yeah, completely untrue.
That was untrue when there was a longer video that was posted afterward. But the other thing too is when he went on with Savannah Guthrie, whichever network she was with, he claimed to be a Vietnam vet, which he wasn't. And Snopes kept all of those things in there. So the allegations that he had made were still deemed to be true. So that was another one that I'm not sure if they've updated, but it's terrible to, target a child and, make this guy have to suffer through what he did. By the way, he got a settlement from CNN. And the reason I bring that up, so did I think Kyle Rittenhouse. So a couple of pretty big settlements allegedly that they ended up getting after suing them. But just this week, CNN was found guilty in court once again for there's a fella that they were saying when he was in Afghanistan, he was charging people outrageous amount of money in order to come to the U.S. There's basically they smeared this guy. He sued them. He won. So he's won $5 million for that lie. And now they're going to announce punitive damages. And so this is part of the business model for a lot of these outlets, that they, I guess, put money in the budget for potential court cases or settlements, because lying about what happens, or using faulty references to try and back themselves up, which is why a PolitiFact may be useful to them in court. Is that if they can say, well, Snopes or PolitiFact ended up saying this, and this was when we were doing our research. I mean, and you see it, we've seen it a lot. You remember that guy that was outside of college game day holding up a sign that said "send beer" or something like that? And whoever it was, Anheuser-Busch, gave him a contract for a year or something like that to raise money for, I don't know, the homeless or something like this. And it turned out he reposted like 2 years ago something from Daniel Tosh that touched on race or something like this. And so
Comedian,
he lost.
Daniel Tosh.
That's right. Yeah. And so he got skewered. And so these are the types of things that, when we're not dealing with facts, like, it's easy to see how people get hurt in the shrapnel when they make that bomb explode. So I have no sympathy for CNN. They made their bed. Yeah, and I truly hope that these business models fail. I mean, MSNBC, they pay Rachel Maddow, it was a ludicrous amount of money. Obviously, she earned it because she negotiated it, but it was for 1 day a week. They dropped it by $5 million, I think, a year, and now she's got to go back to work for 5 days. So they're having some trouble, I think, keeping their viewers. So it may start to fail if a new government here in Canada comes into play and they turn the taps off to all the money that these media outlets are getting. The ones that are going to still stand are the independent ones that aren't getting government money to survive. They'll have to look themselves in the mirror and be accountable I bring up CBC, CTV, and the Toronto Star, three that I feel don't have the best reputation in Canada for how they cover news. But Yeah,
Oh, don't
that's
forget
part of
Global. Please don't forget Global. They're horrible too.
the. Well, I'm just using that disinformation global disinformation index. They use them as those were the only ones that they showed on their index to say
Which
that
is
they were.
ridiculous to me because during the Freedom Convoy, there was I can't remember the name of the host, this lady that's on CBC. She had Marco Mendicino on talking about the Freedom Convoy and made in the form of a question the allegation that it was Russian agents in Canada. They were behind the Freedom Convoy, and
Mhm,
and the ombudsman was called over this, and they had to issue an apology. And of course, they do it quietly. You know, they say the lie flamboyantly, and then they come back with the correction
mhm.
quietly. And this it seems that this is the MO for these agencies, and it doesn't stop there. There was the allegations that two men from the Freedom Convoy went in and tried to set a building on fire and block the doors, which that wasn't the case. It didn't happen. Apparently something happened, but it had nothing to do with Freedom Convoy people, and it looked like somebody was trying to
Mhm.
set something up. But they run with these stories because they know that they're going to smear somebody,
Right.
and
And you're bringing up Marco Mendicino. So he also lied about the protesters closing down the border illegally down in South Surrey. That was a lie. It was the police that shut it down. I was there covering that.
correct, yeah.
But you might remember the guy carrying the Nazi flag. Uh, that 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 photo apparently was taken uh, away from the scene, but there was like some construction or something, and there was gated, like the blue fencing type of a thing to prevent people from going in. And so, from what I've been told, that you had to kind of get into there to get that photograph. It's funny that I think it was Justin Trudeau's photographer was the one that came up with that photo, and he happened to be
No,
there.
oh, I think you're confusing two different ones.
Oh, maybe I am.
There's another one where there was a guy wearing ski mask and he had a Confederate flag with a truck on it. And that's
Okay,
where
okay.
somebody saw what looked like Justin Trudeau's photographer snapping shots of it from the angle in which where all the media outlets got their photographs from.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, there's no confirmation, but it did look a lot like him. And he, I think, right down to the brand of camera that he was using. Like, so,
Right. Yeah. No, you touched on a couple of great points there, and this is where fact checking really would serve a good purpose if they were doing it honestly. Because whether you're Trudeau or Poliev, Maxime Bernier, Jagmeet Singh, they all, like I said, 35 years ago when I studied journalism, they were all on an equal, dais. Like we would see them and our importance on how we cover them to be equal. We're not putting on that jersey because we want Trudeau there, for example, because he's given us money or we agree with his ideology. And that's part's what shifted. So a fact checking company would be remarkable if what it was always done with, with truth. I mean, I even sent you this week a couple of examples on the wildfires down in California. I'd have to just go by memory about it, but a lot of the things that were coming up, is it true or not? Are they not pumping water from this massive reservoir up north because of a Delta smelt fish? Was this one particular Inez reservoir empty or not? Houston said it wasn't. Did Trump really propose something for, getting more water down to, Southern California? And what I found in reading the one article, by the way, anytime just for you and anybody else, whenever you see the word debunk in journalism, it usually, like 99% of the time, means it's not debunked. In fact, it's true. So that's a little side note there. But
okay, that's good to know.
yeah, debunk is a word that people use to because it's got power, it's got a hard K in it, and it has impact when you say it, but it's always used in order to cover up your crime, kind of a thing. So it hasn't been debunked for sure. But
Wow.
what I end up noticing is that if I remember it properly, when they referred to whether it was true or fact checking, did Trump really have something for Gavin Newsom to sign? He had something, but it wasn't exactly as it was labeled out there. And so they're kind of splitting hairs a little bit, type of a thing. But it's easy to say, well, Newsom said it wasn't there. Two people who are just professors said, well, I've never seen something like this before. So they labeled Trump's allegation as false, but that they didn't have any background on it. And then later on, it's discovered that he did have some type of a proposal. It's like when he said the Obama administration was wiretapping Trump Tower. Well, they weren't wiretapping. I guess they were collecting metadata or whatever it's called. So when they finally had to announce that during that campaign, when he said that they were spying on him, that he actually lied, it was false claim because they weren't wiretapping him. You see how they can still tell the truth, but what they're doing is they're splitting hairs, right, in order to do it.
Being manipulative. It's like your kid saying, like, you know, I didn't do it, but then finding some way around it. They did do it. Kids do this all the time. This is you know, oh yeah, oh no, I only spent $50. Oh, I said doll hairs. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
give me a break. Give me a break. And this is supposed to be fact checking. These are supposed to be the ones that we're there to trust. But like, so how should we find the truth? You know, we the last thing we want is a government agency to come in and tell us what is true and what isn't. We know that absolutely what that would be is partisan, and for the ruling party at the time to be just like a one tool that they can wipe everyone out with. That's awful. It goes against the Americans' First Amendment. It goes against the idea of freedom of expression in Canada. So how should we do this? Like, if they're proving that these independent organizations can't be trusted, who do we trust then?
Mm-hmm. I've struggled with that for a long time. I got back into journalism a few years ago with this sort of as one of the things that propelled me to want to do it. I just was so disappointed with where the industry went from being a noble profession to being one that's now, like, we all agree, is a joke. Part of the problem is, we'll label these guys as fake. And I've already done that here in saying that my experience with CBC and the Toronto Star and CTV Global, they're not as reputable as they once were many years ago. Mm-hmm. But their viewers or their journalists will end up saying, well, the Epoch Times is totally fake news as well. And so we've got this divide where we've kind of pledged allegiance to this media outlet, but not that one. And so we're part of the problem. I mean, if you have a Facebook group or Signal groups or wherever you're getting a lot of your content from, it's now getting all streamed. The same sort of messaging is there to reaffirm what you already believe. So if you believe Trump is Hitler, everything that comes on Facebook and Signal and Twitter, or sorry, X, that it's all going to reaffirm that. But if you think he's awesome, that's what it's going to be. So we don't have the balance of getting our information that way. So we're part of that problem. But again, I don't hold a lot of hope that media is going to start tracking into trying to regain trust. I mean, just as a friend I was talking to you about, I do a baseball league for the special needs community. And one of my volunteers, she was the employee and the aide for my MLA in my town, and he's in the NDP. And when I was covering the by-election here in Cloverdale, she had gotten my dignitaries for a huge event we had run, which included my federal Liberal member of Parliament, the MLA she worked for, who was with the NDP, our Surrey mayor. And I said, hey, the guy that vacated his seat, can you just check with your contact? And so I guess she talked to him, found out, well, who does he write for? Well, this is with the Epoch Times, so she'd never heard of us. And then I guess he said, oh, they're not reputable. Don't talk to them again, kind of a thing. And she just tore me apart, right? As if I'm this huge, terrible person, right? But the problem comes again is that we're we're picking sides and we're labeling everybody else terrible. So if somebody in the CBC or Global does an actual good job, we're still labeling or just presuming the whole network is, they've got the reputation that, well, one good, accurate legal story doesn't, make up for all the crime that they've done leading up to that. So we're in a divided nation that needs some healing, but I'm not sure how we're going to do it. The media for sure can make inroads, but as soon as the CBC does something positive about Pierre Poilievre, for example, then they're going to get probably a lot of feedback from their listeners, and viewers are going to say, how dare you, maybe lose people in viewership. So, they're walking that line. Like, why do you think CNN keeps lying about, Covington Catholic, Kyle Rittenhouse, and this veteran or this guy out in Afghanistan? That's what their viewers want to hear.
Right.
I wish
They
I
don't
could
want
help
to
you with that
alienate
question, brother.
yeah, they want to alienate their own base, so they'll sell them the sensationalism and lies that they're coddling. They're coddling their audience. That is unbelievable.
Believe it.
Jeff, where can people find you online? You said you don't have social
Yeah,
media.
I don't do social media. I know when we were talking last time, I was thinking you'd asked me to at least send some of my work to you. I still haven't done that, so maybe I'll do it this time. And but yeah, I purposely have tried to avoid getting caught up in that. Just some of the things that seem to come along with having a higher profile. I never knew if maybe one day I would try to enter politics or just have something that would. I wouldn't want to necessarily have a trail that would, disqualify me for something because of something I said at one point, right? Like a Daniel Tosh post or something like that. So,
well, I'm never running for politics, that's for sure. Not with all the things I've said. The website is the Epoch Times, or the Epic Times, as it's actually pronounced. I learned that today the hard way, but go check it out. I've covered many articles from this site. Great, fantastic journalism happening over there. More stuff that sounds more closely related to, I don't know, the truth, the things that are actually happening on the ground. So go check it out. It's fantastic. Like I said, my seal of approval, chef's kiss. And Jeff, you're doing a fantastic job. Thanks so much for coming.
Like I said, I'm here for you whenever you need me, brother. It helps, my profile at my own home. My wife loves me more the more I talk to you. So
that's too funny.